We're going back to a 1950s America.
Up next, this Democratic Congresswoman just went on an insane rant on MSNBC. This is Congresswoman Latifah Simon reacting to Trump's big speech. Take a listen.
We're going back to a 1950s America. I want to be very clear about that for those of us who have parents, who have aunts and uncles and communities that are still alive, who remembered what a Jim Crow America looks like. Tonight in the chamber, you could look easily to your right and you can see essentially a monolithic group of folks who look just like one another. And then you went to the left side and you would see what America truly looks like. A beautiful tapestry of all of us who pray differently, who look differently, who come from four corners of the globe to make this country what it is. We know what we all deserve. And I got to say, as a new member of Congress, I was shocked at what seemed like a blatant disrespect for the House. And it wasn't coming from Representative Green. It was coming from the men behind him on the right side who were telling him and yelling, "Sit down." I mean, it felt like I was watching something in a history class of racists yelling at an elderly black man challenging the president of the United States not to cut medical care for the sick. What have we become?
Wow. That is one of the most unhinged rants I've ever heard from a Democrat on television, which is saying something, to be quite clear. Now, guys, please do me a favor. Do not make fun of her looks in the comments. Congresswoman Simon was born legally blind, and when I see people making fun of her, it's always just like, come on, let's talk about the substance of what she has to say. And that substance is batshit insane. You do not have to support Trump. You do not have to agree with everything he says or is doing. But the notion that he is trying to return us to the era of Jim Crow or segregation or the 1950s is absolutely detached from reality. It is not true in any way, shape, or form. He had a multiracial coalition to which he has appointed officials from all walks of life and backgrounds, including a black cabinet member, including 2 Latino cabinet members, a gay cabinet member. Sorry, maybe my history books are wrong. I don't remember that being how the 1950s was. I mean, look at this speech. They literally honored and celebrated a 13-year-old black boy with brain cancer. I must have just missed the part of the Jim Crow era where they did stuff like that. You can disagree with Trump on his immigration, on his policies, on his reversal of DEI stuff, but even that is in many ways trying to return to like an MLK colorblind vision of equality under the law and away from the divisive, toxic, reverse discrimination and identity-obsessed nonsense. But you can disagree with all of that, yet check the unhinged alarmist rhetoric at the door, because it is out of control and is simply ridiculous. And to be pointing to the racial diversity of the Democratic side versus the Republican side, first off, there are some non-white Republicans in Congress and of different backgrounds, but also it's just like a very superficial way. First off, there's a heck of a lot more diversity in that chamber all around than there was in the 1950s. So it's just a divisive way of kind of saying that, oh, because they're not as diverse as a party, they're segregationists. 2 + 2 does not equal 5 there, love. You cannot jump from one observation to the other. And I'm sorry, but not the most ridiculous part of this, but the second or third most ridiculous part of this is where Congresswoman Simon compares the fact that they ejected Al Green, the Democrat who does happen to be a black man, who got up and disrupted and shouted during Trump's address to Congress. The fact that they ejected him because he violated the rules and was trying to shout down and interrupt a president's speech, she's saying that's like watching people cheer for like violence or discrimination against black people during segregation. What? You think they wouldn't have done the same thing if a white Democrat had gotten up? You can't do that. You can't interrupt and shout down a president's speech. It's a violation of the House rules. It's not free speech. You're trying to stop someone else's speech, and they have every right to escort you out, and they would do the same thing to anybody of any racial background. This is utter, divisive, race-baiting nonsense. And also shame on the MSNBC journalist who's like nodding along and going, yeah, to this absolutely delusional and ridiculous rant. These representatives from the Democratic Party, whether it's Jasmine Crockett, whether it's this woman are so extreme, and they use the most unhinged rhetoric constantly. And yet these people are like getting more and more attention as rising stars in their party. Do they just want to lose forever? Is that it? Speaking of divisive rhetoric and people who want to lose forever, another interesting little bit here is from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who was Kamala Harris's running mate, who referenced the fact that during his speech before Congress, Trump kind of pettily, but also hilariously, called out Elizabeth Warren with his favorite nickname for her, Pocahontas. Because remember, Elizabeth Warren, the senator from my home state of Massachusetts, pretended for many years inaccurately to be Native American. Well, Tim Walz and many others accused Trump of using a racial slur by saying that. Take a listen to this.
The idea of a president standing at that rostrum and throwing a slur at a United States senator in the middle because you disagree on policy is absolutely ridiculous.
Sorry, but calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas is not a slur. It's actually funny, and you could say it's kind of a petty insult, but it's not a racial slur, and it's not racist. It's poking fun at somebody who actually did the racism when she pretended falsely for many years to be Native American, even though she or her family were never a member of any tribe. She then released DNA results that showed she might be 1 in 1,000 parts genetically American Indian, which Cherokee leaders spoke out against and said is not even a valid way to prove your ancestry or heritage. She then had to apologize to the Cherokee people for cosplaying their culture. And of course, it's hard to prove this, but this may have been to her personal and professional benefit. She listed herself as Native American on her application to the Texas bar, and then was touted as a professor of color at Harvard. And we all know with the affirmative action stuff how likely it is that being a member of a minority group helps you get ahead. Regardless, the one who did the racially offensive thing here is not President Trump for making a joke about it. Now, you could argue it is beneath the dignity of a congressional speech, a president's congressional speech, to be taking partisan swipes at people. I agree, but it is Trump, so what do you expect? But it is not a racial slur. Y'all sound ridiculous. And if anything, the person who did the racism here is the white lady who cosplayed as Native American for decades and then had to apologize to actual Native Americans. This is the thing. Democrats will never learn. Honestly, at least some of them will never learn to stop frivolously invoking racism and calling people racist. People tune you out at this point because y'all throw that around like candy on Halloween. And then it loses its power to actually push back on stuff that's actually racist and harmful. And that's a real shame. But what do you guys think? Can you believe he said this on TV? What did you think of Congresswoman Simon's remarks as well? Let me know in the comments.